Hi, I'm Mike Newman. Welcome to Texas. These mighty creatures behind me make up a lot of the history of Texas. Early settlers crossbred their cattle with cattle from Mexico, and the result is what you see behind me. Pretty amazing. Following the Civil War and the development of meat processing plants in Chicago, a great demand for beef developed east of Texas. As a result, the great cattle drives began across Texas, Oklahoma, and to the railheads in Kansas. It was a long, hard journey, not just for the cattle, but also for the cowboys. When they got to places like Dodge City, the cattle were loaded up on rail cars for their journey to Chicago. And for those cattle, Chicago really was the end of the line. You see, every one of those animals didn't die of natural causes. They were slaughtered. So it was probably good that, unlike us humans, they didn't know about death. They didn't know there was an end of the line. But there is, and death happens. For some, it's unexpected. For some, it's anticipated. For all of us, it's inevitable. Every time people drive by a hospital, a cemetery, see a funeral procession, or attend a funeral, they're reminded of the inevitable. And when death pays a visit to their lives, there are always questions. Why now? Why her? Why him? Why me? And where is God? And have you noticed that people really don't like to use the words die, dead, and death? We choose to use more comforting words to describe the harsh reality of death, like gone to their heavenly home, passed away, in a better place, in heaven. Whatever euphemism we choose to call it, death is death, and death stinks. In the King James Bible, when Jesus told the people to roll the stone away from Lazarus' grave, Martha said, "Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead for 4 days." Martha had it right. Death stinks. There was a time in our country when the stark reality of death was commonplace. In 1850, a man's life expectancy was between 40 and 50 years of age. The infant mortality rate was 40 times what it is today. And more often than not, adults and children died in their homes instead of in hospitals. Wakes were often in the family's living room. Death was not far away. It's a lot different today. With advances in medicine, hospitals, and nursing homes, today's life expectancy is pushing 80 years. We live in a day and age that promotes the denial of death. Cosmetic surgery hides the effect of aging. The promise that science can fix just about anything someday has led about 90 people to be frozen in hopes of being thawed out and cured. No matter how hard we try, we can't avoid the reality of death. Someone watching this may have been saved by CPR, a defibrillator, or an organ transplant. But in reality, there's still an appointment to keep with death. But that's not the way God created His world to be. After God created everything else, including cattle, He created Adam and Eve. He gave them everything, including one simple rule. He said, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die." Let's pause here for a minute and ask a question. God said, if you do this, you'll die. I wonder if Adam and Eve had any idea what that little 3-letter word meant, die. Maybe it's like a child who was never burned. You say to them, "Don't touch that or you get burned." And what do? Now they understand burned. But Adam and Eve never got the opportunity to understand die through trial and error. If you haven't heard the story before, Satan came along and said, "No problem. You won't die. Try it. You'll like it." But they did. And instead of you and me growing up in the Garden of Eden, we'll be planted in a garden like this one. It really is a matter of not if, but when. Death happens every day. In fact, the certainty of death has been like a gaping, black, bottomless pit in the ground of people's lives. Every world culture, religion, philosophy, and ideology has tried to deal with that pit that lies in the path of humanity. And why? Well, that moment that Adam and Eve took a bite of that fruit, something happened. They became ashamed of being naked. They ran into the bushes, and Adam grabbed a bunch of leaves and tried to make clothes. But the most terrifying thing of all, Adam would tell God, was, "I heard you walking in the garden, and I was afraid." And for all generations since Adam and Eve, there's been an inherent, undeniable, inescapable fear of God and a fear of death. For thousands upon thousands of years, mankind has tried to ease that fear of death by appeasing gods through sacrifices of food, animals, and even people. It wasn't that long ago, and maybe even in some remote places of the world today, that men, women, and children were sacrificed because others were afraid. In fact, driven by the fear of dying, the health food and nutritional supplement industries today have sales that top $30 billion. But everyone who buys the products is still going to die. Don't smoke, don't drink, think positive, less stress are just some of the warnings that are supposed to help us live longer. But we still die. But even if we do enough good things, be good enough, sacrifice enough, maybe after death, will there still be a paradise? Now, some Eastern religions came up with a pretty novel solution to that question. Don't worry, you're going to get another chance. Reincarnation is the divine reset button on your computer. And when you crash, you just get rebooted as a bug, a cow, or a king. Now that would be the ultimate makeover. But even for them, they still have to die. And any of those who don't really worry about what comes after death. They might be afraid of dying, but believe that when you die, you just die. That's all there is. Well, then why worry about the God thing? All of this adds up to a bunch of ideas and philosophies that still leave mankind terrified and eventually dead. But what really happens when we die? Is it simply a casket, a funeral, a plot, and a stone? Is there more? Are we judged on the basis of our efforts? Do we wait for judgment? Is that all there is? Let's go to the discussion guide.